Good morning and welcome back to our Ask the Agronomist podcast. We are here once again with Phil. Phil, how's it going?
It's going just great. Another beautiful sunny day out.
It is so nice. All of the snow is partially melted, I guess.
We'll include that in our talk today. But not quite snow-free yet. But
Close. All right, well today we've got an exciting topic on the docket. We are going to talk about early planted soybeans and the benefits of doing it before corn even.
Yeah. So I always say that just because it catches people's attention, I guess. But it is true. The earlier you plant soybeans, it does increase their yield potential. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the physiology and some of that, how it relates to why you can get higher yields by planting earlier.
Okay, sounds good. Well, let's get started.
So just I guess as a little introduction, people may think, oh, okay, well, why, or why is it going to that point? If you look over the last 40 years or so, we planted soybeans. Really, the planting date has increased a lot. Went up, I should say, earlier planting by sometimes 2 to 3 weeks, depending on where you're at in the U.S. And some of that comes from logistics. We have larger farmers; they need to get out there earlier. And even now, it seems like we see a lot more guys with more than one planter. So they'll get two planters so that they can run corn and soybeans at the same time.
Right.
But some of the other things we're going to talk about is also seed technology. So we have better technology, more able to withstand cold and stuff early in the season, and then we have a lot better seed treatments too.
Right.
Than we did. And one other thing that we talk about a lot, especially on the precision ag side, is the planter technology.
Right.
So we've got all kinds of things on the planter, from closing wheels and better seed depth control, along with pneumatic or hydraulic downforce that keeps it from getting too compacted in the furrow. So just a lot of things that have led us to be able to plant soybeans earlier, and that's kind of the direction things are continuing to go.
Okay.
So why would you want to plant soybeans earlier? Obviously, guys say, higher yields. So how do you get higher yields? I threw that up there because a lot of guys for corn like to have a reference. And, this isn't a one-size-fits-all. The 0.4 to 0.9 really depends which area you're at in Iowa and in the upper Midwest. But it's true. You can lose, especially once you get into that early May time frame, you start to lose around a half a bushel a day by planting, waiting to plant. So that should be a thought in your mind, even with soybeans, that you're still losing some potential as the days go on. But why do we get higher yields? So number one, there's more opportunity. And by more opportunity, what I mean is there's more opportunity to capture sunlight. What we're actually harvesting, other than just the corn and the beans that goes in the bin, is the sun's energy and the sunlight. So we spend more time in the vegetative stages. So what does that mean? So it may get out of the ground slower, which we'll talk about in a second, but it actually tends to hit that V1, that first trifoliate stage, earlier.
Right.
So that means that we hit reproduction slightly earlier. So more time in vegetative stages means that we're going to get typically a little bit higher node production. And I hear a lot of guys say, oh man, that field was so much taller than that other field. Now, does that relate to node production? Not really.
Right.
Guys always think of as taller, it's got higher yields. That's not true. You can go out there and you can see a soybean field that's got 18 nodes and it's maybe only this high compared to one that's got 18 nodes and it's this high.
Right.
That's different. There's different depending on the early season temperatures and stuff. There's a different amount of internode elongation. I was talking to somebody yesterday. He said, "Man, you could go out there and you could see those internodes are just really spread out." So that doesn't necessarily equate to taller. Doesn't mean higher yields. You want more nodes because the more nodes you have, the more potential for flowers and pods.
Right. Yep.
So later on. So the reproductive part, it's hitting that earlier, and we tend to. It's kind of like when somebody sprays a fungicide. It lengthens that seed fill period out. So if you hit R1 sooner, you tend to see a little bit more time into the seed fill period. It spends more time getting stuff back into the seed. Soybeans do an extremely good job of remobilizing a lot of those nutrients. So, even though it may be a bad situation out there late in the season, they've still got a lot of stored sugars or photosynthase, so what's coming from the sun, and that's stored up in their leaves. And so they can remove that into the seed later in the season. So it spends more time there. And then even with corn, the more time it spends in seed fill, you're going to get more yield. Tends to give you more moisture too, but with soybeans we don't worry about that so much because they're more light dependent late in the season.
Right.
So. And the last thing I threw on there was the canopy closure part. You know, that's number one. You want to close the canopy as fast as you can. That's why planting soybeans earlier is really one of the top things you can do in terms of yield impact, in terms of production practices.
Yep.
So close that canopy faster, you lose less moisture, and the soybeans are receiving as much of that sunlight as they can.
Yep.
So I threw this in here. This was from my climate account on our farm. I just threw it in there because it shows you kind of how much rain. You can't see the top. I scrolled down a little bit there, but this is rainfall since January 1, and that's historic 10-year averages. So I threw this in there in the next slide. You moved to that one to show that a lot of guys were talking about this spring and how it's turning out. You know, we're at least in this area, we're higher in moisture. We've still got snow out there to melt.
Yeah.
And we're colder. So, you know, whether the Farmer's Almanac is going to be right or not, you know, if we're going into the spring being colder, that's definitely, soil temps are a primary concern, corn or beans. You know, and we're sitting here in the middle, or where we're at 32 degrees is soil temp, which makes sense. Guys in the south are a little warmer.
In the tropics down there.
Yeah, in the tropics, I guess you can call it that. But no, the soil temperature needs to be probably at the front of the conversation when it comes to planting.
Right.
Because obviously you're going to have, when you plant soybeans into cooler temperatures, you know, you have a delayed germination. Now, is delayed germination bad? Not necessarily. You know, guys, when it comes to corn, want the corn to pop out at the exact same time. And when it comes to soybeans, that's probably not paramount. That's probably not the most critical factor, that they pop out at exactly the same rate. You want them to get out of the ground, and when we plant them early, temperatures are in the 50s, hopefully, and it's going to take 3 weeks to get out of the ground.
Right. So with that, we have a lot of considerations and watch-outs too.
You need to think about all these things that are going to impact that and how it goes through the rest of the season. So too wet, obviously ponding issues, things like that. If it's too wet, that shouldn't be a field that you plant early. If you're always wet, if it's a pothole, that kind of thing, you shouldn't be planting that early. On the same side, if it's too cold, you know, that temperature and moisture play a big part in that germination. You know, we talk about chilling injury and stuff. You know, you don't want to plant it into something that it's going to cause it to fail from the get-go. So tillage practices to me go back to too wet, too cold. You know, what kind of tillage practices are you doing? Is the soil warming faster? That kind of thing. And then the disease potential. You know, SDS and SCN. Is there compaction issues out there? You know, don't try planting soybeans as early as possible in maybe your worst possible field to do it in. You know, stick with those fields that are maybe a better situation. The soils warm up better. You know, it's not a lot of wet holes and things like that. You know, and then the last thing is really protecting it with seed treatments. You know, we have a lot of great options: the Soy Shield Select, Soy Shield Plus. They give you protection on the insect side as well as the fungicide part. You know, that's really kind of what guys worry about when it comes to early planting. You know, if it's going to be in the 50s, if there's a potential, if you're trying to plant it early to get that extra yield, it's worth it. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to pay for itself in terms of giving you that bump and that edge. But it also protects you from the slow germination. When those cells are going really slow, there's an opportunity for those fungi and things to get in there. So that's what it's protecting. It's keeping those things out while it germinates slow, so it hits the, you know, V1 basically sooner than the rest of your fields. So protection against the elements, you know, those harmful things, is extremely important if you're planting early. I would seriously consider, you know, seed treatments and so forth if you want to plant early.
All right, lots of good benefits. Excuse me, just some watch out areas too to make sure to consider.
Yeah, you want to get consider the whole thing. You know, sometimes they throw a lot of stuff at you, but if you want to try getting more yield out of your soybeans, that is probably the number one thing to consider, is planting a little bit earlier. You know, and it depends which region you're in. You know, for us, it's actually just early May, late April, but as you go north and south, that date changes and the way it's going to pay off. So.
Okay, well, good deal. Thanks for joining us today, Phil.
You're welcome.
Thank you for our followers for tuning in, and have a good day.